in analog and comes out analog and stays analog the whole time. You could, if you wanted, digitize the signal and then have the subwoofer and the crossover available. And because it's a processor, you can have two buttons, one associated with this pair of connectors that gives you an analog path, and another button associated with the same connectors that gives you the digital path. So it's a very, very flexible processor, the kind of thing that I think is really needed in the two-channel world to make two-channel products relevant again. The second thing, speaking of being relevant in the two-channel world, is the fact that we have USB connections. So you've got a USB device connector on the rear, which allows you to connect to a computer and pass USB into the preamp, or a USB host connector on the front, which allows you to connect your favorite Apple portable device, iPod, iPhone, iPad, and listen to the music you normally carry around in your pants. So these are going to be fully compliant Apple connected devices, which means that you could plug an iPad into this and charge the iPad. As far as I know, we're the first non-Apple product that lets you actually charge an iPad, which is there's a 2 amp line inside that lets you do that.
I didn't know that.
So I said there were two things about the preamp. The first is the processing capability. The second is the USB, what we do with USB. The best USB devices today use a technique called asynchronous synchronization. And what that means is that the USB DAC, which is where these techniques are used, the USB DAC is in charge of the clock. In an ordinary USB system, the computer's in charge of the clock, and the computer pushes the data through the system when it has a chance to do so. So like, if you think about USB connecting to a printer, it doesn't really matter whether the data for the print job arrives a few hundred milliseconds early or late. Nobody's going to notice. But with audio, you have to prioritize data so that you don't have gaps, right? So there's a timing element associated with audio over USB. So when the audio clock comes from the computer, as you would expect, it's not really a dedicated audio clock. So it's not very good to start with, and it's not very clean because it's in the presence of many other clocks inside the computer. So much better to be able to pull data when you need it and establish the clock yourself. So that's where the asynchronous part comes in. So we do that. We also separate our clock from the clock that has to pull the data out of the USB receiver. So ultimately what happens is we have our own clock, which is separated from every other clock, and it is a direct multiple of whatever the source is. So if you have a 44.1 source, we're going to use a 44.1 clock, and only that clock, no other clock running.
Really?
If we have a 48K source, we're going to use a 48K clock, no other clock, only that one running. So very pure timing. And the last thing is, in order to maintain the timing, we have what's called galvanic isolation, separating the USB inputs from the audio circuitry electrically. So if you were to put an ohm meter on the end of this wire and trying to find a place in the audio circuit, the power, the ground, the signal path, there's no connection between the wire on this end and the audio signal. Same thing coming in the rear from your computer.
I didn't even know that was possible.
So there's a lot of attention to detail required to really optimize the system. But at the end of the day, what you have is something that is as good as the theoretical best you could do with a CD player. And so in practice, it's better than what you actually get from any CD player. And that's because with a storage device like this, you can have an iPhone that has data which is bit perfect copies of what you had on a compact disc. So you can have a full resolution, well, Apple lossless or a WAV file, full resolution on your phone. You have all the data, then we have the clock and all the isolation. So we have a way to put the data and the clock together to get a D to A conversion, which is as good as it could theoretically be done in a CD player, better than it's actually done in a CD player. And because it's all inside the preamp, we don't have to deal with an analog output stage of a CD player or a USB DAC and an analog input stage of a preamp. We completely eliminate them. So we have this fantastic digital section, and we've eliminated 2 analog audio stages. So the performance and the value that you get from a system like this is really off the charts. I would rather have my phone and this preamp than any CD player at any price with a conventional preamp.
Really? Even a 501?
502.
502.
Yeah, even the 502. So anyway, I think it's a fantastic value. It's going to cost $5,000 retail, and we'll have it shipping the first of the year.
Yeah, that's exciting. I can't wait to hear it. Thank you.